So, thank you for the introduction. I'm basically the one here for getting it easy. I'm not going too much into technical details, so I'm perfectly the right end of this block before the coffee break then starts. So don't fall asleep, because I also have some sort of an Easter egg in my presentation. And whoever spots that Easter egg, it's a person in this room, gets some sort of congratulations from me. Anyways, who is me? I'm Carsten Samaschke. I'm CEO of VanillaCore. VanillaCore is a company around, obviously open source, around cloud technologies, around AI, because nowadays everything needs to be AI. And we are working a lot within the private cloud environments, and we are working a lot with projects like Sovereign Cloud Stack. You might have heard that name. With GovStack, you might not have heard about that so far, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And everything is basically in the context of international collaboration. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. But let me start, because AI, we need to have an AI picture in there. Earlier on, we needed to have cat content. Nowadays, it's an AI picture. Digital sovereignty is a thing that is currently utterly important, and it's growing in importance, right? So that is not just a thing that is true here in Germany. It is true across the world, as long as you are not the United States or China, that is. What we see is a growing demand on that, and we see that growing demand a lot in not so developed countries, and I put that in quotation marks because development is something which is quite interesting to define. It's probably not always about economy, but that's a different thing. To foster and to support the ideas of digital sovereignty, the ideas of countries taking their own destiny into their own hands, taking their own fate into their own hands, there's a project in place called GovStack. GovStack is a project which is initiated and run by ITU, International Telecommunication Union in Geneva. It's a United Nations organization, and GIZ, the German Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. It's basically a set of building blocks that enable countries to, in the end, digitalize their infrastructure, digitalize their citizen services, and roll them out to everyone. And as we are here in the context of ALASCA, and as we are here in the context of something like Sovereign Cloud Stack, obviously we need to have some building block that is the natural foundation of that, and that is what we call in the GovStack environment the cloud building block, which I'm going to touch upon. But as you can see, there is many more, like identity, authentication, security, e-learning, e-marketplace, and so on and so forth. And GovStack is currently evolving from an idea into something which can actually be touched. There are the first countries that are actually rolling out the platforms, that are actually rolling out the solutions. The solutions themselves, they are mostly open source. The whole idea of GovStack is to avoid any kind of vendor lock. So what we basically have is description of functionalities that are implemented by independent software solutions. These building blocks basically specify what needs to be implemented. And then a country can basically choose themselves which building blocks do we want to roll out, in which capacity, on which platform. Obviously, if they would ask me, if they would ask, for example, Kurt, which I see here in the audience, we would heavily recommend them to use the cloud foundation block built upon a Sovereign Cloud Stack as a foundation of what they do. But let's be honest, they sometimes don't want to listen to the good guys. They probably want to still run their VMware and what have you. So we allow them to do that because in the end, it is about sovereignty. It's about sovereign decisions. But the most important aspect of the whole ecosystem is where you run it. And what we want to enable is basically an environment where basically every kind of solution can be rolled out. So to us, to the GovStack project, Sovereign Cloud Stack is a natural foundation because it's a growing project. You know about that. I don't need to tell you about that. It is developed in open. It is developed with openness in mind. And there is not just like the Sovereign Cloud Stack. There's already multiple implementations of that. Sovereign Cloud Stack is basically utterly interesting to the whole ecosystem because, and I just like stole that from a presentation Kurt and me had together at the Open Infrastructure Summit. Sovereign Cloud Stack is rolled out by UNICC, which is the United Nations ICT arm. They basically provide hosting. They basically provide IT services to countries, and even those guys are currently running the first projects based upon Sovereign Cloud Stack. That gives you an idea of how big and how large that kind of ecosystem can grow. It will be and it can be rolled out globally. Probably within UNICC data centers, probably on-premise in the countries themselves, because what we also want to do, what we also want to achieve is a culture of openness, a culture of learning, a culture of constant evolution. We want to enable them. We want to make sure that the countries would be able to, run their own environments in their own countries, or at least under their control. Remember what I said initially, digital sovereignty, right? And one of the pillars of digital sovereignty is obviously controlling what you run, where you run it, and how you run it. And that then again aligns beautifully with the idea of Sovereign Cloud Stack, because when you just look at, and I just like compared those things, when you basically look at like the different approaches that we have, the GovStack project, it's developed in public. The assembly, which I'm leading, is developed in public. The documentation is public. The source codes are public. The automation is public. And you can basically take that one point per point over to the Sovereign Cloud Stack. Specifications developed in public, software developed in public, documentation is public, source codes are public, automation is public. Everything is public and open, and it can be used, it can be adjusted, it can be utilized wherever you want to. And that is a very, very fundamental pillar of open source, of openness, and of digital sovereignty in the end. So you see, the basic infrastructure that is basically discussed here on this summit is something which is of utter relevance across the globe, literally. So what we currently do is we run projects in Africa, we run projects in Asia, we run projects in Southern America, and I'm very much looking forward to that because we also are planning to run projects in the Caribbean, and if that happens, I cannot guarantee that I come back. No, just because, like, obviously, we also want to support in the skill and capacity building. I don't know what you were thinking. We just want to make sure that digital sovereignty and that open source and the open source mindsets are properly understood, that they are not just used, but that the countries also start leveraging their own knowledge, building their own knowledge, and contribute back. Because one of the things that we have seen when talking to countries in Africa, one of the fears they have is the fear of another colonization, right? And with cloud technology, or the absence of cloud technology, with AI, or the absence of it, you can easily force a country into something which is very close to colonization, but it does not initially feel like that, right? You provide them with gracious and generous hyperscaler environments, which you can use, dear country. Just use it as long as you want. We will probably not charge you for the next 2 or 3 years, but then in the end, you are basically vendor locked. You are in our environment, and then you can basically pay for it, pay for it, pay for it. We want to avoid that, which does not mean that we don't want to have business running there. Obviously, we all want to make money. At least I do. But in the end, what we want to ensure is that the countries can take their own fate into their own hands. So we provide them, in the context of GovStack, also with knowledge. We skill them, and we also help them develop, literally develop the capacities in their data centers. We plan with them, and we support them in rolling out. There are some events that already took place. There are future events that will take place. And with the idea of openness, everything is again open, right? The training material that Kurt, for example, created is open and can be used. The documentation is open on the Sovereign Cloud Stack website, right? So we open all of that to enable countries for their own journey into digital sovereignty. And if you look closely, you see one person that you have seen on stage today already. You see probably me. And you see a lot of people in different countries. And I tell you one thing, those are very often very, very poor countries. And when you are there, when you are working with the people on the ground there, you start to understand what open source actually means to them. Because it is the only way that they can participate in the global infrastructure, in building their own capacities. It's the only way that they can get out of their current status into something which is way more developed. You might argue from that perspective, hey, is every of these countries truly one of the best democracies in the world? Probably not. But also, and in fact, for example, to the right top, you see a picture from Eswatini. Eswatini is a very small country near South Africa, which is the last absolute monarchy in the world. So you get an understanding of how good democracy is lived there. But on the other hand, providing something like that to the countries, supporting them, fostering knowledge, giving them technology. It's always a two-sided sword. But I am very much convinced that in the end, that is going to be beneficial to the citizens. Because technology and knowledge, they are the foundational building blocks for then making them ask the next question to try to move ahead, right? And to give you an understanding of how much that is important to a country, we have one of the countries participating in GovStack is Kazakhstan. Probably also, again, a country which is not known as the root of democracy. Nonetheless, that country understands that digital sovereignty requires open source. The president himself basically fostered that kind of approach. Within a very short amount of time, they basically transformed their old Soviet-style kind of bureaucracy into a modern digital environment. I was just going to say into a modern digital bureaucracy, but that's what they try to avoid. They obviously work a little bit differently than we do with data, but in the end, Kazakhstan, as an example, is on its way using open source technology. They don't use Sovereign Cloud Stack. I feel like they are using OpenStack at the foundation, though. But they are basically transforming their country very short-term and very powerful into some sort of a digitalization powerhouse using open source technologies, right? And that is something which we want to foster. We want to make sure that digital sovereignty, that knowledge, that the technologies are spread and used across the globe. So that is where basically the ring closes then again. Because when you think of that, digital sovereignty requires open source. You cannot have digital sovereignty, you cannot have your kind of sovereign development without open source technology and without an open source cloud foundation. And that is why we love Sovereign Cloud Stack, and that is why we love such events as this one here. And now enjoy your coffee break. Question? You can clap your hands if you want to.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Can you please name at least one or few examples of the worst usage of GovStack in the world?
The worst usage?
The worst.
That's a very good question. Actually, it's probably very hard to name that, but let me put it that way. It is as with every technology that you use. You can always use it for the good, or, for example, for spying on people, for forcing them onto some ecosystem, right? So when you look at the building blocks of GovStack, like digital ID, wallets, payments, analytics, those things can be used to just develop and, in quotation marks, just deploy digital services, servicing the people, or you can also use them to use the big data or the data collected by them to ensure that people are compliant with you, which basically turns a good idea into probably something which is negative. Without pointing to any country, because again, it's very easy to say, well, that country did not do well, and that's why we don't want to work with them. We want to develop them, right? But just think of an environment where you would probably have everything digitalized and then apply big data approaches to that, to profile, to work out who is probably cheating the system. That can be something very good, but it can also be something very powerful against the people. So that is how much I go. You can probably think of a country where I just said they rolled out a few things, that they could potentially use that. They would potentially use that. I don't know if they actually do that. But that is exactly the kind of questions, the kind of thin line that we have to walk with technology. We cannot avoid the technology falls into the wrong hands. But what we can do is, and that is what we try to achieve, we can try to make sure that the technology is also in the right hands as well, so that both sides have equal opportunity. That still is not a level playing field, to be honest, because in the end, you still have a country against a group of people, but at least from a purely technology level, both have the same weapons to work with, as compared to where one has all the technology and the other don't have it at all. So that is basically the very thin line that is to be walked. I can just speak of myself. It's pretty transformative working with those countries, working with countries that have a completely different understanding of how people should participate or not participate, but still realizing that the technology, in the end, first of all, is neutral, but if rolled out properly, can actually benefit the people and improve their lives. And that is then, to some extent, game-changing long-term. So worst experiences, well, again, think of those things. You have all the services digitalized, you have a huge data pool, and then you can work with that from there.